Here we are behind the EOF202020. We've got a 20-inch, 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 all three identical except for the pump, which is tied into the right-hand unit from behind, left-hand unit from the front. Here we have our breaker system. These breakers will isolate your heat elements only. These are your control fuses. Each individual fryer has its own control fuses and breakers. Basket elevators, elevator motor and gearbox, micro switch, chain is on the back side, and then the shaft up here at the top to go ahead and rise up. We have our two contactors here at the bottom. This is our safety contactor, our heat contactor. The safety contactor will drop out in the case of a high limit. The heat contactor comes on and off to regulate the temperature of the oil as it's required. Heat elements all wired in right here. Notice they're easy to get to. These are the drain lines from each of the units. They all go to a central filter pump. The filter pump right here, outlet, inlet, break the union, take the hose loose, 2 wires, and the pump can be removed with 4 bolts. Everything is made to be simple, to make it easy to take care of and get it out of the way. Let's talk about basket elevator removal. Very simple process. You have 2 bolts up here under the bottom, 2 bolts right here at the very top, and you'll reach up here, take this thumb screw loose, lift the carrier off, and once the carrier is off, with these 2 bolts out here, these 2 bolts out here, and the basket in the down position, the shaft in the down position, you'll be able to tilt this out and pull this complete elevator assembly out. Simple 3-wire plug right here connects power to the elevator. Filter pump, it's motor, pump. Filter pump removal is as easy as breaking this union, taking this pipe loose, taking this hose connection loose right here, and then you've got 4 bolts. Unwire the motor from the end bell right here. Once you get these loose, it'll turn around. You can unwire these leads and remove the pump, put the new one back on, and reverse everything. Again, this filter pump, suction side comes in the bottom, discharge out the top. It'll come around through here. This loop is in there so that the oil won't backflow or siphon back out of the vats and back into the filter pan. So this needs to be kept in place. Again, this is a discharge, goes out to the front. When it hits the front, it'll hit that main header. You can run it to any of the pumps that you may have selected. This particular unit is just temporarily wired in. But when you wire yours in, you're going to bring a hot on these 3, and then NOT volts here, and a ground over here to this lug. Your conduit will feed in through this hole in the back, and then it goes up under the fryer and will go to the wall. So all incoming voltage comes in from the back of the fryer, feeds into here. You've got your 3 hots, your NOT volts, your ground, and that's all you need. You need that for each one of the fryers, all 3. So you're going to have 3 pulls of power, 3 circuit breakers feeding this bank of fryers. And then of course there's a cover that goes on here to cover this when we're all done. Like I say, we've got it temporarily wired in right now, so just to test everything. This is the EOF2020 filter pan. You'll notice we have a quick disconnect hose here in the front. This is for connecting up to the fryer. There is a welded filter screen down here in the very bottom. This does not come out. This keeps sediment from getting into your large piece of sediment in case there's a hole in the paper or the screen. You've got 4 hold down bolts. These are actually threaded in place, so if they should happen to break off through use, you can go ahead and pull those out and replace those. If setting this up for the first time, you want to go ahead, you have a filter screen. This is a reusable filter screen instead of filter paper. and you would put that down in there like so. Make sure that it is within the frame, the confines of the frame. Then we have what we call a hold down frame. This hold down frame then sits atop of that to make that sealing edge, that white sealing edge, seal. And then we lock the 4 handles in, pushing down slightly. All of those are locked in place. Now any sediment that goes in has to go through this. If you were going to go ahead and filter, you would at this point go ahead and put some filter powder across the top of this. And then we also have a crumb catcher. This crumb catcher, the filter lines come in right here. So this catches the largest pieces of sediment. It sifts down through here. It'll go through the screen, up through the hose, and then into the filter pump, where it can be relayed to go wherever you want, depending on how you've got those valves set. Once you've got the filter pan put together and you're ready to install it, you just slide it in here. Make sure this cover is on. Got a cover right here that slides up in there. We're going to slide this in. You want this pushed all the way to the back, so that with that all the way to the back, all of the lines will dump into it. Make sure it goes all the way up. You'll have to lift up on this hose, pull that back, slide that in, and let it snap. That should fit nice and tight like what you see right there. And we're ready to go ahead and receive the oil, and that'll be our next step. This valve right here controls this discharge hose right here. If you want to get rid of your old oil, you put your discharge hose in here. You'd go ahead, open this to the discharge valve setting, and it would let your oil come out of there. Make sure that all of these valves, you've got one under each one of the vats. Make sure these are always in the closed position unless you're filtering oil and want it to go back into that vat. Your drain valve handle, and this is the left-hand fryer. This is the only one that actually has the pump switch on it. They all have a lift switch, heat switch, on switch. This is the only one that has a pump. It controls the pump. Pump is in the rear of this unit. Here we have the inside of the control panel. In the back plane, we have our high limit module, a 450-degree trip with a high limit probe wired in right here. Over here we have our heat relay. The heat relay is powered by the controller. Whenever the temperature drops 3 degrees below set point, which is our hysteresis, it will go ahead and activate this relay, which will in turn pull in the heat contactor in the back and our yellow heat light. We have our control transformer, which provides 20 to 26 volts AC. It is protected by this 1 amp fuse, and this is solely for powering up the controller. That's all it does, is just to power up the controller. And then right here we have our alarm module. This alarm, any kind of issues that go on or an end of cook cycle, this is the only alarm on this fryer. Here we have the back side of our control panel. We have our heat rocker switch, our power rocker switch. This is for our pump. This is not on all the panels. It's going to be only on the left-hand unit. It is control your filter pump. And then here's your elevator, your basket elevator switch, where you can turn those off. We have your green power light, your orange heat light, and your red high limit light. This is your output board on your controller. This is your main controller. This is your CPU board. And then down below at the end of this ribbon cable is your display board, which also has your keypad on it. Power is coming through right here. This is your 20 to 24 volts coming from your transformer, comes into the board right here. On the opposite end of that plug, 16-pin plug, you'll find your drain switch input. The drain switch is wired normally open, and the controller is looking for a closed output in order to heat. If it sees an open output, it is from your drain switch or an open input into the board. It's going to sound your alarm, and it's going to send up a message that says drain open. This probe right here is your variable probe. It is the probe that we use, that the controller looks at to control the temperature of the oil. This is your element probe coming in here. It is the one that's tied directly to the element, and it senses too hot an element. If there is no oil on the element, it is going to get to an excessive temperature. We set that up in our max element temperature settings and inside the controller, and during programming we'll talk about that. But when it exceeds that temperature, this is where that is. On the outputs, we got our alarm output on the white wire. The blue with the white is going to the heat contactor and pulling that in. This white with a yellow stripe is the down for our right hand elevator. The solid yellow is the up for our right hand elevator. Our left elevator is the white with the orange for down, and orange, solid orange, for the up. All of the blues are just a common, and they wire into the terminal strip. They go from here, it'll go to one of these Wagos, and you can see they're tied together, so they're all just a common hot. It's one leg of power. The inside of the fry vat. Got the element brackets, which hold the elements apart. Right here we have our high limit probe. You can tell the high limit probe. We have an element probe here as well, and you can tell the two of them apart because the high limit probe goes through these brackets. It's got these little washers that are welded to these clamps, and it holds it away from the element. So it's actually sensing the oil temperature. And the tip of this probe should be 1.5 inches from this last bracket. So from here to here should be 1.5 inches, 3/16 of an inch between here and the side of the element. So again, 3/16 between the inside edge of the probe and the element, and then 1.5 inches from the tip to this first clamp. And then this other is here just to stabilize it. It needs to be somewhere in between here and the two. On this element probe, we want to have these two bands. They're going to be clamped right up against the element. We're actually looking at that temperature of that element, so we want no gap there. Over here is your variable probe, and this is the one that actually controls the oil. It is doing all the control of the oil. It ties directly into the board where we looked at it a little while ago. It ties directly into the board. And then this is your oil return. When your oil comes back through the pump system, it will return through this nozzle and jet down in here to help get rid of any debris that you've accumulated down there. The debris will get down in here from your cooking. You'll be washing it down. It'll end up in here and go to the drain. Now here we are at the front side of the EOF202020. Again, 20-inch, 20-inch, 20-inch. Thus the name. Gonna go across the front here. We have the power switch. We have the heat switch. We have the lift switch for your elevators. This is where your pump would be if this were the left-hand unit, but being the right-hand unit, it doesn't have one. Your power, heat, high limit lights, and of course your controller. We're going to leave the heat switch off. We're going to turn the power on. You'll notice that it starts to come up, gives you a version, network disabled, power failure light, and it says press start to preheat. Well, we want to make sure that we have at least 200-degree oil in here because we're going to filter. So we're going to hit start, and the oil is 218 degrees. So that's good for filtering. If we want to raise that, you can see it says preheat to 335 degrees. We would press this heat button. Immediately the yellow light comes on because it's calling for heat. You see the red heat light. That red heat light means the controller is below temp. This means that we're actually applying heat to the unit. We're going to turn it off, and we're going to do a filter. Now the first thing we want to do is make sure that there's nothing in the filter pan. We've just cleaned that and connected it. So we're going to open up this drain valve. Now when I lift this up and open it, it will alarm and tell me that the drain is open. So I'm up. There it goes open. I can silence that so that I don't have to hear it. So right now the oil is draining into the filter pan. Now while it's doing that, I know that when I get done, I want to put the oil back into this fry vat. Since I know that, I've got a line that goes across the top here in back, and it has a valve on it for each individual vat. I want to make sure that this one is open. It says fill this vat, so I'm going to lift that up. So now when I recirculate my oil, it'll come back and go straight into this fry vat. I want to make sure this one's closed and make sure that one's closed. They are. The handles are straight down, they're closed. So I won't have any coming back there. Okay, all my oil is drained out now. So now what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to close this back, make sure that this metal tab goes into this hole down here to push in that plunger switch. It goes in, it pushes it down, and I get an alarm that says check the oil level, make sure the vat's full before pressing start. I left my heat off, so I have no heat on, I have an empty vat, and then of course if I press the start, it will try to go ahead and go to temperature. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach over here, I'm going to turn my pump on, and I've now got my pump going. I've got this valve here going to the fry vats. If I had it down, it would go to that discharge hose coupling. So right now my oil is coming back into the fry vat. Now we want to let this oil run, let that pump run until you start seeing air bubbles come up inside the fry vat. Let them do that for about 45 seconds, a couple minutes. Won't hurt a thing. Just you don't want to walk off and just let it go. But you can hear it now if you listen real good. You can hear the bubbles coming up inside the fry vat. At that point, I'm going to reach back over here. I'm going to turn off this pump. And you can hear it silence. Okay, still have the heat switch off, still have my start. I have not pressed it, so I'm not heating yet. I want to close off this vat. As soon as you finish filtering, close that vat off, and then you won't accidentally, if you were filtering, say, the next vat, send some oil back up into this one. You don't want to overfill this vat, and you could easily do that by leaving the wrong valves open. So once I've got that, the vat's full, I'm going to go ahead and press the start. Right now I've got it set to a preheat of 335. I'm going to bump that down, and to do that I'm going to press my temperature button, and I'm going to put 200 and start. Okay, now it's set to 200 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my heat on, and if you watch here you'll see that slowly start to build up here in just a minute. But we're going to go ahead and bring that up. If I want at any time to see what the actual temperature is, if you press this once, it'll say enter cook temp. Press it again, it'll give you the actual, and it'll display that actual temperature right there. After about 20 seconds, it'll go ahead and default go back to actual, or you can press the button and then it'll go right back, or press the clear, it goes back to a normal display. Okay, so we're going to let this heat up for just a second, get this back up to 200 degrees. While we're doing that, we have the power light on. Our heat light is now on because we have the heat switch on and it's calling for heat. So you've got this orange light on. If this high limit comes on, it's because the sensor has sent a signal to that high limit board that it's over 450 degrees. This would only happen in the case of a runaway temperature, or if that probe sometimes can get bent where it's right up against the heat element. If it's touching that heat element, the heat element will get over 450 degrees pretty quick. So that would do that. The lift switch right now is in the off position. The lift switch, of course, is for the basket elevators. On switch, heat switch on. And you'll notice the temperature is now climbing up, 197, 198. It will soon hit my 200 degree mark, at which time it'll alarm and tell me that it's there. Okay, and you'll notice that it continues to rise. Now it's telling me again that set point is reached, and now it's ready to go ahead and do a cook cycle. So If I wanted to do a cook cycle, I could go ahead and press my start now and set for 2 minutes. It would do a 2-minute cook cycle. Okay, so we have satisfied our temperature at 200 degrees. We want to go ahead and try the basket. So we're going to turn the lift switch on. We're going to press the basket key. This is the only basket I have set up. So we're going to go ahead and press the down arrow, and we want the left basket. So we press that number 4, and you'll see the basket go ahead and drop. You'll notice the little red LED for the basket is lit up. Now this will stay lit up because that output is going out to that basket for 20 seconds. After 20 seconds, this little light will go out, and at that point you can go ahead and try to do another. To get it to go back up, we're going to press the basket. It says up or down. We're going to press the up, and again pick that left, and then watch the basket go back up. And at the end of the cycle, that light will still be on because it's going to be on for 20 seconds. Then it will extinguish and tell you that the timer is run. Now we'll go ahead and we're going to go into the actual general operation of the fryer control panel. As you can see, the control panel has the red clear, green start, your number keypad, menu, edit, temperature, time, boil, cool, the alarm silence, and then the basket keys, your power button or power light, your heat light, and your red high limit light. I'm going to go ahead and turn this unit on, and upon powering it on, you're going to see the version of software and all come up, memory test, and it's going to go into an alarm. Every time this unit is powered up after a power failure, could be from pressing the power switch off, it may be the result of a power outage, but every time that it loses power and regains power, it's going to come up with this message. If you want to go ahead and go into the preheat cycle and start to warm the fryer up, at this point we're going to go ahead and press the start button. Now you'll notice the heat light came on here, but our yellow heat light is still not on. We're at 150 degrees. This is the actual temperature right now. So we're going to go ahead and turn the cook switch on, and when I turn that on, you'll notice now we've applied power to the heat contactor. So this will slowly start to heat up. Now the reason that we wanted to use that press to start, where it comes up and it gives us the power failure, that is the result of our having the ILS turned on, interlocking start, and we'll get into that in a little while when we start setting up and making sure everything is set up for a particular customer. But the ILS being on will give you that message. If you turn that off, it'll skip that and go straight into the preheat mode. The thing about the ILS is if you have a power issue, a lot of times when power comes up, it doesn't come up at full power. So this keeps from burning up contactor coils. It also keeps the unit from coming on and starting to heat. Perhaps you were doing a boil out and you've dropped all your oil. There's no oil in the vat. You don't want it to turn around and just go ahead and start heating. It could cause a fire. So for safety reasons and for equipment safety reasons, you would want to go ahead and use the ILS. All of Giles fryers will ship from the factory with the ILS turned on. So let's go back. We're going to go back to put this back in the cook. The yellow light comes on, and we're going to allow this unit to go ahead and start heating up. And of course we're looking for 350 degrees as our set point. And it's going to jump a little bit quicker than it normally would, only because I'm trying to do this with a simulator. So you'll see the numbers will start to scroll up pretty quickly, and we're going to ease on up towards that. Now once it gets to there, it's going to go ahead and say it'll stir the alarm. Now the alarm stir oil comes on when it reaches temperature to tell you that there's a cold zone underneath and to allow that mixture. You'll stir that oil, bring that cold oil up, and normally it will go ahead and it'll drop that temperature again. Now it's going to give about 10 seconds to look at it. If it needs continual heating, it will continue to heat. If it's up to temperature, as it is now, it'll go ahead, it'll now show the set point only, and it'll go ahead and turn the heat light off. So if I wanted to go back and see what that actual temperature was, I could press this, it says enter cook temp, or I can do it again and it'll give me the actual temperature. This is the actual temperature of the oil right now, 355 degrees. Press this, I can go to cook temp, I can raise that by going to say 355 and press start. Or if I can, well 350, I'm sorry, 350 degrees is my maximum temperature, so I could not go to 355. If I wanted to drop that temperature, I could bring it down to 325, hit start, and it took the 325. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and we'll put that back to 350 where I had it. Okay, so we're back at 350 degrees. Now the entire vat is 350 degrees. So any menus that we use at this point are going to be just like using timers only, because we're not changing the temperature, we're only changing the time for the vat. Now to use one of the menus, once they're set up, you'll press this menu button twice, 1, 2, and it comes up with menu 1. You'll see the 2 and 8 are lit up, so we can scroll down and choose from different menus, many different menus. Okay, and then when we find a menu that we want to use, we just go ahead, we select start, and it's going to ask us, do we want it on both baskets? Are we going to do it just on the left or just on the right? In this case, let's go ahead and do just the left. Okay, and you'll see that it went to the popcorn chicken, while this one remained on the 3 minutes crispy chicken. So if I'm going to say I want to change this one also, again, I'll go 1, 2, go ahead and select a different, we'll do bone-in wings. Hit start. We're going to do the right side. So now we've got bone-in wings over here and popcorn chicken on that. The beauty of this is that you can cook 2 different products at the same time, all in the same vat. Again, the temperature will only be 350. You cannot change that unless you change the temperature of the whole vat, and then it would change it for both products. So to start a cook cycle, now that we've already got these selected, we'll go ahead, we're going to press the start, and we're going to take that left basket and press that left basket. That was our 2 minutes popcorn chicken, so we've started timing. The basket is going down into the oil, and it will go ahead and time out. Now at 2/3 of the cook cycle, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get a stir alarm to stir the product. While we're waiting on that, again, we've got our temperature key, so we can always look at our actual temperature. Do it again, actual temperature. We can get back out of there, get right back to cooking. We have our boil button. When we try to do a boil out, we can go ahead and do the boil button. That'll bring us to 200 degrees. We have our cool button, which in between cooks, if it's going to be a while, press that button, it'll hold that temperature at 275 to save on cooking oil. When you get ready to exit out of that and go back to cooking, you'll press the clear and then one of the other buttons, and it'll go ahead and bring it back up to regular cooking temperature. The basket button, you can always press that to raise the basket or lower the basket. During a cook cycle, it's all done automatically, so there's no reason to do that. Now as it gets on down here, you're going to go into the stir alarm, and that's the alarm that I mentioned was going to be there to stir the product so that it doesn't stick together. And then she'll finish cooking, and at the end of a cook cycle, you'll see the basket light come on, and that alarm will sound to let you know that cooking is done. Now if at any time you wanted to start this other menu, you could press start, this one, and now it's started cooking as well. The basket is going down on that side, and it is cooking. Okay, we're down to 15 seconds now. We're going to go ahead in just a second. It's going to be completed. It's going to give you that it's done, and it's going to go ahead and raise that basket. It goes to alarm. Cook is done, left, and now we've got the remaining time for the right one is on. So that's how you can cook multiple products. You can go ahead, we could have pressed them both to drop at the same time, and then they would have worked through their own timers, again, just like we did now. We want to exit this. Say we decided that we didn't really want to do the bone-in wings, or it was accidentally dropped. We can go ahead and press the clear button, you see that it has the right arrow to stop. We're going to go ahead and stop, and we've completed. The basket is on its way back up out of the oil. And that's how we run a cooking cycle. The alternative way to doing, if you know what your menu is, you can go ahead and just press menu and then press the menu number, be it 14, so it went right to the chicken bites. Or we can do a clear, we can go menu 2, and then you would just do the start, just like you did previously, and it would go ahead and do it, as opposed to doing the menu button twice and then scrolling through the menus. As you become familiar with your product mix, you'll know which menus are what, so you won't have to go through the scrolling, I'm sure. Okay, now that we know how to use those menus, we may want to customize or make our own menus. Now, in order to do that, what we want to do is press the menu button twice. Then we can select a menu from those that are given, or we can come on down. I'm going to bring it on down to one that we don't already have. We'll go to menu number 36. There's nothing set up there. It's an empty menu at this point. So once we decide that's the one we want to do, we're going to press the edit button. Now you notice we have a horizontal line across the time, so we could set the time. Right above that is menu 36. That's the name. So let's go ahead, let's start out with a name. What do we want to call this? Okay, so we're just going to call this legs. So we want to do this. We're going to go ahead, we're going to press start, and then we're going to go ahead, we're going to do L. Going to come across, the E is good already. We want to bring this down to a G, and then we'll bring this down to an S. Okay, and we're going to leave that on 36. We'll just leave that like it is. So we're okay with that, so we're going to press start. So now we've got legs 36 is our menu name. So now we're going to go ahead, we're going to drop down to the time. Let's go ahead and insert a time of 4 minutes. 4 minutes. And press start to save it. We're good with that. So let's come on down. Our next thing down is the stir. Now we can select different stir modes. Normal is going to be that 62%. Most of your product is going to remain at that 62% normal. The options that we have, we can skip it altogether and just not even do a stir, or we can do a force, which means that they'll always have it on no matter what you do. So we're going to bring that back to normal, leave it there. We have a fish filter is next. If you're doing fish, a lot of times the flavor of fish, that odor of fish, is going to be transferred to chicken or other products that are cooked after it. We found to minimize that, we can do a fish filter. So after every drop of fish, every run of fish, the fryer will force you to filter that oil. You'll drop that oil down, filter that out, get those crumbs out of there, and then allow that oil to come back up into the fryer, and that should minimize that fish smell. So if we were doing fish, we may want to go ahead, we'd turn that on, but since we're not, we're going to leave this in the off position. So now we're good with everything the way it is. We're going to press edit, it's saved, and now we're saved. So we're going to do a clear here, and if we wanted to do that menu 36, we could go here, press our 36, and start. We're going to do it on 4, and then there we are, legs. So now we've got our legs, and we've still got our bone-in wings. We haven't changed everything. Now if we wanted to do it on both, we could do this. We could go 36, start, and we'd hit number 5. Now we're doing legs on both sides. So that's how you set up a menu. You can start from blanks, you can go in, you can change a menu, do anything you want, but you always want to start by hitting menu, and then you're going to scroll down to the one that you want to change. Okay. A few other features that you may want to try to experiment with sometimes. If you want to raise or lower the baskets, you can go ahead and press the basket key. Now we have to be up to cook temperature. If it's below the cook temperature, it will not let you go ahead and drop any product. But if we're up to cook temperature, we can hit the basket key. It says up or down. We're going to go ahead, let's press down, and we can do both, right or left. We're going to do just the left, and you can see the basket light came on and it's coming down. Now if we turn around, we want to go ahead and do the other side. Once again, we can press basket. We'll do up, and we will do the right side on this one. Now anytime that you make a basket change, you have to wait 20 seconds for the light to extinguish before you can reverse. So if you make a mistake and it starts dropping down, you cannot just go ahead and hit basket back up and then get it to cancel out like that. Now if it's during a cook cycle, you can certainly go ahead and press the clear button. It'll stop the cook cycle, but that basket is going to continue down before it comes back up. If you want to enter the cool mode at any point, you can go ahead, press the cool button, and it tells you 275 degrees, and now our set point is 275 degrees. So that oil will go ahead and cool on down to 275 degrees. Okay. Now if you ever want to, so let's go ahead, we're going to clear this to clear out of here. And leave the cool mode. Yes. Now I dropped the temperature input while we were doing this. And I'm going to go ahead and turn the cook switch off because I don't want to heat this oil anymore. But let's say we had dropped all of our oil and we're going to do a boil out. At this point, with that temperature down, we can go ahead and press the boil key, and it will go into boil out mode. It has to be below 200 degrees in order to go out to the boil out mode. Typically you'd be with tap water, you'd be 75 to 80 degrees, possibly even cooler when you did that. But it'll go for 30 minutes and then it'll go ahead and go into an alarm. In high altitude areas, you may want to make an adjustment, and we will be able to adjust this in a little while. You may want to adjust this to 190 degrees because you actually do not want it to boil out. You want the water to just be really hot, but not actually boiling. At 200, 212 degrees is an actual boil. And of course, if it heats up to 200, when it shuts off, it's going to go ahead and see it is heating now. It would go ahead and actually start to boil. So, because it shuts off at 200, but with the residual heat in the elements, it's going to overrun that 212 degrees. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to clear, and then we have to hit that left arrow to actually do it so that it's not accidental, and we're back out of there. We're going to go in and we can customize user settings. Okay, so how we do that is we would go in, we press the clock button. It says enter cook time. We're going to enter 4 nines. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then press start. It gives us user settings left or right, and that just doesn't matter which one you use. It'll just go through them in a different order. But we'll go with number 6. We're going to go to the right. And this is number down here is the steps. This is step 1 of the user settings. And we can change the temperature scale from Fahrenheit. If we wanted to change that, we would press edit, and then we could go to Celsius, and you can see that it immediately went to Celsius. Okay, so we're going to go back up to Fahrenheit, and we're going to do edit to save it, and we're back. So that's number 1. We go to number 2, our force filter. This has got the force filter on. In a minute we're going to see how many cycles that is, but after so many time cycles, the fryer is going to force you to, the operator, to filter the oil. It'll be looking for, when it goes into a force filter, it will not let you run another menu. It's looking for the drain valve to open, and it's looking for the temperature inside the vat to drop below a preset. And we will look at that filter reset temperature in a little while. You can change that as well. Normally it's running around 290 degrees. That's kind of the standard. So it's looking for the internal temperature to drop below 290 degrees. That way, between the two of them, it's hard for an operator to fake out the machine and just make it look like they're filtering and actually skip the filtering. So we're going to leave that in the on right now. Force filter snooze. If you had the force filter on, the snooze would allow them to run an extra cycle. We have that off, so we're not going to allow the extra cycle. We want to make sure they do it at that predetermined time. The filter count. This is the one, and after every 10 cycles, it's going to force you to filter. If you had the force filter turned off, then after every 10 cycles, it would just remind you to filter. It would say it's time to filter, and you could just hit the alarm reset and just keep on going. Just keep cooking and pretend like you never saw it. Wouldn't even matter. The guard band is always going to be set to 900. No need to change that. That's a factory default setting. The maximum set point, saw that earlier, 350 degrees. When I tried to bump up to 355, it would not let me do it. It'll go down, but it will not go over 350 degrees. Auto cool. That's this pressing of this cool button. This one's set so that it will automatically go into that cool mode if it has not been used for a predetermined amount of minutes, and that is 20 minutes. So you can go ahead, this can be changed. You can run this on up to 30 minutes. I think you can go as high as like 60 minutes. And if you want to do that, then you certainly can. Okay. The next one, Audible Alarm. That's how long the alarm will sound without anybody pressing the key. It'll silence itself after 10 seconds. The cool temperature. If you go into that cool mode, 275 degrees, that can be adjusted as well. The boil temperature, 200 degrees is standard. Again, higher elevations, you may want to go ahead and bump this on down, you know, to 190 or so. Okay. The filter reset. When the unit goes into that force filter mode, I mentioned that you have to have the drain valve, has to see the drain valve open, and it'll give a drain valve open message. And it's also looking for this temperature to drop below 290 degrees on this unit. If it drops below 290 degrees after it sees that drain valve open, it will go ahead and allow the filter reset to the count of 10 again, and then once you get done filtering, you'll be able to run 10 more cycles before it'll come back. If it does not drop below this 290 degrees, it will not. It will just keep on telling you to filter. Boil out time, 30 minutes. That can be adjusted. The stir alarm, once the stir alarm comes on, you can go ahead and turn that off if you want here, or you could do it back in the, you could have done that back in the actual product settings as well. The stir alarm, 62%. We talked about that. That can be changed. Key beep enable. Not too worried about listening to the keys, so that's off. English. The other choices here. We have Spanish. We have French. So we're going to leave this in English. And then we're right back to the number one. So that's all of all of those things can be customized to make it so that it fits the particular customer. And to get out of this, we just press the clear and we're out. Now this is for service technicians only. These are factory settings. Occasionally these will come into play. To get into those, we're going to press the clock, and then it says cook time. It's 2750, 2750, and start. And again, left or right to view. We're going to press the number 6. That's the interlock switch. That's the ILS. That's the one that gives you the power failure message. If you were to turn that off, when you turn the unit on, it's below temperature, it would immediately start heating, as opposed to giving you the message to press the start to begin preheating. Number 2, the maximum element temp. This one's set to 560 degrees. We have one probe in there that is tied directly to the heat element. If that heat element exceeds 560 degrees, we can safely assume that there is no oil in there. It's an extra safety, and it will shut the heat elements off. If you were to bring this up, if you bring it up too high, you run the chance of fire on an element that may have a little bit of a coating of oil on it. If it gets up high enough, it can actually strike that into a fire. So we want to do that as safely as we can, bring it as low as we can. It will throw a message that says max element temp has been exceeded. If you get beyond that and it decides to shut down for that. But 560 is a good number for this machine. The hysteresis is 3 degrees. At 3 degrees below set point, the heat will come on and it will run to set point. You could drop that down. On gas machines, we often run that at 6 degrees below because the recovery is so fast. But 3 degrees on an electric machine is pretty sensible and works extremely well. We also have a hysteresis 2. Now this is just for gas machines, has nothing to do with your EOFs. The oil temperature offset, this is a calibration factor. If you found that a new controller and probe were not going together very well, and you were reading one temp with your probe and another one with the machine, you may want to set this. We don't recommend that you adjust it more than 10 to 15 degrees. Any more than that, what happens is as the temperature rises, that will expand, so it gets farther and farther away from your actual reading. So no more than 10 to 15 degrees maximum. In most cases, you'll never use it. It'll stay at 0. The melt cycle is off on this machine. If you were to run solid shortening to prevent a fire during the heat cycle in the morning or at the beginning of a process, you want to go ahead and ramp that temperature up slowly. So it goes into a series of turning the heat on and off, on and off, and it'll continue to just blink that heat on. You'll see this light actually heating on, off as it heats up, and that's to prevent it from just going full on and then scorching that oil that's melted underneath, trying to get the other to melt. Element add differential enable. The EOFs do not have a 4th temperature probe, so they do not have an element add enable. So you could just leave that off. Turning it on will give you errors. Max element add differential is related to the last one. Leave that as it is. Passcode enable. You can actually set a passcode on this machine. If I was to turn that on, what it'll do is it'll make it go ahead and go into a passcode every time I try to access any of these menus or make any changes. It's going to come up with a passcode. The passcode for this machine, if you enable it, is 7001, and we'll be looking at that in just a second. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and turn this on, so when we go to our next step, it will prompt us to do that. So let's press edit. We're going to turn that on and press edit to save. Cold ignition fan voltage, gas machine, nothing to do with this machine. High fire, nothing to do with this machine. Low fire, nothing with this machine. And then we're back to our interlock switch. We'll press clear, and we're done with those settings. Of interest to the service tech, oftentimes you want to be able to take a look at temperature sensors and things to be able to do a little diagnostics. Another feature you can do is to press the clock, and then it's going to be, now you see we turned the passcode on just a little while ago, and if you remember right, the passcode is going to be 7001, and then press start. Now it allows me to enter that cook time. And we're going to use the numbers 7777 start. This allows me to go into diagnostics, so we can look at my oil temp sensor. You can see my element sensor. The add level you do not have on this machine, so you don't have the differential, but the board temperature is 79 degrees. So it allows you to be able to look at those temperatures and see what's going on. You can go ahead and press the 6. It'll tell you what machine you've got, how many cook cycles have been run on this machine, how long the cool timers have been on. Okay, and then this just gives you a little bit of information about transmission, and then we're right back to there. So it gives you a little bit of a diagnostic screen. This screen here would probably be the most useful to you, so that you could go ahead, if you had no oil in there, you had a cold fryer, these two numbers right here for the oil and element should be identical. If one of those is extremely off, you should be able to check with your probe and see which one is most closely related to it, and then the other one that is way off would be a faulty sensor. Okay, getting out of this mode, we would of course press the clear button. We're going to go ahead, we're going to try another, so we're going to press the clock. Now since we've entered the passcode one time, we will not have to enter it again unless we power down. So we're in control until we power down. And for this one, we're going to press 8379, 8379, and start. Now test keypad buttons. Now when you do this, this will test your keypad and see if, so we can press a button. We press the boil, and it says boil key. You can press the basket key. It'll say basket. The 4, it'll press the 4. The 6, whatever key you press will come up on that display. So it's just a great little way of checking all of the keys and make sure everything works good. Okay, and then we press the clear, and that gets us back out of there. Now if we were to have the unit running and the oil got below the element, that element sensor would definitely cause it to go into alarm. And when it causes it to go into alarm, it will display on here, like there, error alarm, max element temperature. It's exceeded that max element temperature setting that we have, that we'd established back during our user settings. So we're going to get an ER19. Now, if for whatever reason it cools back down, it will go ahead and it will allow it to reset by pressing start. Sometimes during the morning times when you try to fire the unit up, if you have extremely cold oil, the oil will heat in a certain area and it will get above that temperature, and it'll give you error messages like that every once in a while. But by just stirring the oil, pressing the start button, it'll clear it and you'll be able to get beyond it. But that is a safety, just like having the drain valve switch to keep them from firing the unit up if the oil gets too low. Some of the common errors that might come up if they were to have some issues, if indeed you somehow lose the your variable probe, which is your oil temperature probe, you will get an error that will come up and tell you that there's actually an error. And here it is, the error alarm oil probe, an ER13 error. Now the only way to clear that error is you have to clear the problem. You cannot press the clear, it won't go away, it'll go into alarm is all it will do. But once you have it fixed, you have to power down, power back up. Of course it'll run through its diagnostics. It's going to give you the power failure, press start, and now you've got that back. Now if we were to have a problem with our element sensor, we would get an alarm, and that alarm would come out and actually tell us that's what that is, and that we would have to go ahead and cycle. Here we are, error alarm, element probe, cycle unit power, error 15. Now if I go ahead and I cycle the power as it suggested, the unit will come back up. Of course it's going to give me that alarm, power failure. If I press the preheat, it's going to go ahead and try to heat. Now if I have not corrected the issue, it's going to come right back. So normally what that means is that I have a broken lead. I have a problem with getting any kind of an input. It's not seeing that element sensor. So we need to go ahead and try to figure out what that problem is.